LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the September 5th edition of LiberalViewer Monday Media Mixup. Thanks for joining me. Today I'll be using the 11 best, most newsworthy clips I picked out from the Sunday morning news analysis shows from the big five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States, for what should be a really informative, educational, fair use media criticism and political commentary show for you all today. You can see from my video title, the main topic is MAGA, or do you say that MAGA or MAGA? Some people, I think MAGA seems to be the preferred pronunciation, but MAGA Republicans, a threat to U.S. democracy, and that's because President Joe Biden gave this speech on Thursday that made that assertion that MAGA Republicans are a threat to our democracy, and I think that that's probably true, which I'll discuss in greater depth when I get to the news summaries and to the newsmaker interview clips. And that for my political comedy, for my political comedy, if I wanted to, I could just use the temperatures here where I am in Sacramento, or in my little suburb of Sacramento, Arden Arcade. It's currently 108 degrees. Actually, it was originally supposed to get to 114, and 115 is like the highest it's ever been in Sacramento. And then it's supposed to be 114 tomorrow, 107, 111, 100. This is like 8 days of triple-digit temperatures. You can see, like, some of the days, the low is 76. The low is 76, so that's pretty ridiculous. But that has been kind of a news story, not covered on the Sunday shows. Probably if it happened on the East Coast in New York or Washington, D.C., they'd be covering it. They did have a brief coverage of the Jackson, Mississippi water crisis, which apparently they have water pressure back there, and I'll talk about that when I get to it. But actually, the political comedy I wanted to take is from a member of Congress I can always count on. He's kind of a joke member of Congress, so I guess that's political comedy, but he's the House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy. This is the guy who's going to be the Speaker of the House if the Republicans take back the House of Representatives in the November midterms, most likely anyway. I mean, there's some talk someone else could get it, or he might have a challenge from like Jim Jordan, who would even be worse. But anyway, I wanted to show you this clip from Kevin McCarthy's prebuttal to Biden's speech about the threat of MAGA Republicans, where I'm going to start at about 8.5 minutes in or so, where he makes this weird metaphor to an electrical cord. I didn't quite follow it. And then I'm actually kind of a fan of alliteration, but there are like way too many P's in the first minute of this video. And then I cut some of it and go to the part where he does his prebuttal to Biden's speech, and he actually gets to the point where he's saying actually Biden is the threat to democracy. So that's kind of ridiculous. Anyway, this is why we cannot let the Republicans take back the House of Representatives in the November midterms, because of this guy. Just watch. I apologize for making you watch almost 2.5 minutes of Kevin McCarthy, but I will talk about it a little more. And the whole speech is available on C-SPAN. I put a link down under sources in the video description. But here's 2 minutes, 20 seconds of House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy saying some fairly ridiculous things that I'll talk about a little more after we watch it together over here.
The American experiment and the good people who believe in it have not said their last word. The electric cord of liberty still sparks in our hearts. The spirit of the Pilgrims, the Patriots, and the Pioneers still inspire our souls. Our best days are ahead of us, not behind us. Our nation can flourish again, and under a new historic Republican majority, it will. For the past 2 years have been a time of trial for Americans everywhere. Never in modern times has an administration promised more and delivered less. And they have no one to blame but themselves. In the past 2 years, Joe Biden has launched an assault on the soul of America, on its people, on its laws, on its most sacred values. He has launched an assault on our democracy. His policies have severely wounded America's soul. When the president speaks tonight at Independence Hall, the first lines out of his mouth should be to apologize for slandering tens of millions of Americans as fascists. President Biden wants to talk about the soul of the nation. Tonight, he will say democracy is at stake. And he will declare that only Democrats hold the moral upper hand. What Joe Biden doesn't understand is that the soul of America is in the tens of millions of hardworking people, of loving families, of law-abiding citizens whom he vilified for simply wanting a stronger, safer, and more prosperous country. The soul of America is not the ruling class in Washington. It is the law-abiding, tax-paying American citizen.
I don't know, for someone from the Trump MAGA Republicans, I mean, I guess Trump is an American citizen, although, like, one of his parents wasn't born in the United States, and some people seem to think that that disqualifies you from being an American citizen, which is ridiculous. But tax-paying and law-abiding, Donald, is that like the Donald Trump Republican Party stands for tax-paying and law-abiding? So that's kind of a joke. And what was that, like, electrical cord of American liberty thing? That that is actually why I picked the clip. I didn't quite figure, I never could figure out what that was even supposed to mean. You can let me know what you think down in the comment section. And now I'm going to show you the 5 news summaries from longest to shortest, although I have to pull an audible here and switch 2 of them because if you look down in the video description under my media mentioned, I have the clips numbered from 1 to 11, and I actually put the CBS News Face the Nation clip, which is slightly under 3 minutes, in front of the ABC This Week with George Stephanopoulos news summary, which is slightly more than 3 minutes. So they're both about the same. They're actually both pretty good. I think ABC, I'm going to do the ABC one first. That's what I'm saying. I'm doing clip 3 before clip 2. The ABC news summary that I'm going to show first focuses more on the Biden speech and also what's going on with Trump and the Mar-a-Lago search. And CBS, I think, focuses more on the threat to U.S. democracy, the people, the MAGA Republicans who are being elected to positions where they get to decide whether elections are certified or not. And anyway, I'll talk about that when I get to the CBS one, but I'll start with ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. Martha Raddatz doing this news summary over here.
Good morning and welcome to This Week. Labor Day weekend traditionally marks the unofficial kickoff of campaign season. But President Biden got a head start Thursday. In a primetime address in Philadelphia, he not only took on former President Trump, but his supporters as well, warning that the upcoming elections will be a stark choice between extremism and democracy.
MAGA Republicans do not respect the Constitution. They do not believe in the rule of law. They do not recognize the will of the people.
In his harshest criticism yet, President Biden directly confronting Donald Trump and his MAGA supporters, calling them a real and dangerous threat to American democracy, saying November's midterm elections will be nothing less than a battle for the soul of this nation.
That the Republican Party today is dominated, driven, and intimidated by Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans. And that is a threat to this country.
It's a sharp turn from the healing and unity Biden promised after taking office. Republicans now argue that it's President Biden fanning the flames of division.
President Biden has chosen to divide, demean, and disparage his fellow Americans. Why? Simply because they disagree with his policies.
House GOP leader Kevin McCarthy also accusing Biden of politicizing the Department of Justice after last month's FBI raid of Mar-a-Lago. But a newly released inventory of the items seized in the FBI search providing the most detailed look yet at the trove of government records seized by the FBI. More than 11,000 documents in all, some at the highest levels of security clearance, many commingled with unclassified material. Still under active investigation, who may have had access to that material and whether more is still missing. Trump's own attorney general now calling out his former boss.
It is clearly foolish what happened and inexplicable. They may well be able to make a case out here.
The Justice Department also revealed President Trump's team had concealed documents and blocked several previous attempts to retrieve all of the classified material, raising the potential for obstruction of justice charges. Trump last night using the raid to rile up support for a potential 2024 bid.
The shameful raid and break-in of my home, Mar-a-Lago, was a travesty of justice. The FBI and the Justice Department have become vicious monsters.
While Biden has seen his poll numbers improve in recent weeks, his midterm strategy now focused squarely on making the election a rematch of 2020. Whether that will succeed is up to the voters in November. And let's bring in President Biden's senior advisor and the former mayor of Atlanta, Keisha Lance Bottoms.
And actually, I don't have a clip of Keisha Lance Bottoms, the senior White House advisor. I have one Democrat, Jamie Raskin, representative, a member of the House of Representatives, coming up. But I will have actually Martha Raddatz doing a cross-examination of Representative Michael McCall from Texas, who has like an intelligence background, and she actually at one point asked the question that I wish all Republicans got asked, which is like, so why did Trump take all this top secret material back to his country club in Mar-a-Lago? You know, I mean, whatever criticisms you have of the FBI and the Justice Department, what is he doing with those hundreds, if not thousands of classified documents at Mar-a-Lago after his presidency is over? And they never answer that question. Michael McCall doesn't answer it. And I think Martha McCallum lets him get away with a little bit of both-sidism, which I think was a little bit evident in that news summary where, they say, Republicans say and Democrats say, and who knows who's right. And I don't know. I think the news has to do a little better job than that. I think Mark Strassman, along with Major Garret, does a better job in the CBS News Face the Nation news summary I'm going to show you here, especially about the real threat to U.S. democracy from the election deniers getting elected to positions of power where they get to decide the results of elections. And anyway, I'll talk about that a little more after we watch that CBS News Face the Nation news summary from Major Garret and Mark Strassman. I don't think he's reporting from Atlanta, but Major Garret, you may remember, used to be on Fox News, and later I'm going to show a clip of him, he's the one talking to Jamie Raskin, and he gives him the most, softball pro-Democrat question that makes me think he's, trying to atone for his Fox News sins, but whatever, that's clip 7, this is clip 2, well, technically clip 3, because I switched clip 2 and clip 3, and I'll talk about it a little more after we watch together over here.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Face the Nation. Margaret is taking some time off. Labor Day typically marks the kickoff of the home stretch of an election year. As Americans look ahead to the midterms this November, there is broad and deep anxiety in the country about the health of our democracy. A new CBS News poll this morning shows 72% of Americans think U.S. democracy is under threat. Why? The top answers include the influence of money in politics, potential for political violence, and attempts to overturn elections. Our next hour will focus on these fault lines, fears, and some potential solutions. We begin with CBS News senior national correspondent Mark Strassman with a look at how we got here.
When I'm governor, we're going to take a sledgehammer to these damn electronic voting machines.
Take Arizona's Kari Lake or Pennsylvania's Doug Mastriano.
We the people are pissed.
Republican nominees for governor and election deniers evangelists of the big lie. CBS News election expert David Becker.
What's really important for voters to understand is our process is actually as secure and transparent and professional as it's ever been.
And yet, since the 2020 election, at least 39 states changed or updated voting laws, often spurred by invented claims of widespread election fraud. Texas imposed new ID requirements for mail-in ballots. Georgia restricted drop boxes and absentee ballots. Florida established an elections crime unit. Yet come Election Day, November 8th.
For most voters, they're going to find that the experience is very similar to 2020.
The bigger worry, what comes next? More January 6th outrage? Claims of election rigging? Crowds baying for blood? Nancy! Oh, Nancy! Potentially encouraged by candidates who may refuse to lose. Our research shows in these 6 battleground states, in this November's elections for offices that help certify elections, 53 of 88 Republican candidates are election deniers. That's 60%. In Arizona's 4 major Republican primaries, Steel champions won all of them, worrying other Republicans there.
This cannot be accepted because our democracy cannot withstand it. So we have to continue to push back.
Like many election deniers, Doug Mastriano says as governor, he would have refused to certify Joe Biden won Pennsylvania. He was in the crowd on January 6th. With or without new election laws, every state's chief election officer has to certify results. Usually, that's the Secretary of State. And this November, a number of conservative candidates running for that office are also election deniers. Major?
Mark Strassman in Atlanta.
Yeah, so, he was in Atlanta. He's always in Atlanta, but I guess he's not knocking on the door of the CDC like he was for so long during the pandemic, which, by the way, the pandemic's not over. Like 500 people a day are dying in the United States from COVID. There was some coverage. I'm not going to show you about the new Omicron variant vaccine that's just been approved and is coming out, and I'm not going to talk about that, but I should just add that criticism to all the news summaries that none of the news summaries actually covered COVID, though some of the news shows briefly covered it, and 500 people are dying a day. That is a huge number, and it's like people have decided to move on, but there are possible big COVID consequences in our fall and winter coming up. But anyway, the next news summary is, of course, not really news. It's from Fox News Sundays. And, of course, if you read this book, The Loudest Voice in the Room by Gabriel Sherman, you know that Fox News was created by Roger Ailes to be a propaganda outlet for the Republican Party, which, in fact, it turned out to be, as I showed by creating over 200 Fox News bias videos in my first, decade as a YouTube video maker or whatever. But anyway, this Fox News Sunday news summary covers a lot of the same issues, but I think you'll see the spin. I can take little notes and talk about the spin, but it's Mike Emanuel is in as the last guest host. Well, last rotating guest host of Fox News Sunday before the partisan hack Shannon Bream comes in as the permanent host next Sunday. They talked about what a great journalist she was at the end of Fox News Sunday yesterday, and I almost used that as my political comedy clip because she is quite the partisan hack. She has me blocked on Twitter for no reason that I can determine, and but one of the things I'm looking forward to is Shannon Bream is actually a lawyer and used to cover the Supreme Court, so anytime she says something totally bogus about the law, I can nail her as someone who should know better because she is a lawyer, and many times she's made very substantial errors when talking about the law in the Supreme Court, and so I look forward to that. Shannon Bream is the new host, but I'm getting way off track here. I'm going to show you the Fox News Sunday news summary and talk about it a little more after we watch it together over here.
And hello again from Fox News in Washington. Labor Day weekend traditionally marks the kickoff of the fall campaign season ahead of midterm elections. Republicans are focused on inflation, crime, and the border as they aim to win back the majority in November, while Democrats are heading into the final weeks with renewed momentum. And President Biden heads to critical swing states, revived by improving poll numbers. In a moment, we'll speak with New York Congressman Sean Patrick Maloney, who chairs the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, which works to elect Democrats to the House. And we'll get reaction from Minnesota Congressman Tom Emmer, chair of the National Republican Congressional Committee, the House GOP campaign arm. But first, let's turn to Lucas Tomlinson live at the White House with a look at dueling visits by the president and his predecessor to battleground Pennsylvania. Lucas?
Mike, the president gave a speech Thursday night that the White House insists wasn't political. Many pundits disagree.
MAGA Republicans look at America and see carnage and darkness and despair.
President Biden in Philadelphia delivering what the White House dubbed a speech on the continued battle for the soul of the nation. Biden did not mention his Inflation Reduction Act or student debt relief. Also absent, Pennsylvania's Democratic nominees for U.S. Senate and governor. The commander-in-chief spoke while flanked by 2 U.S. Marines, something he promised not to do while running for office.
I promise you as president, I'll never put you in the middle of politics or personal vendettas. I'll never use the military as a prop.
Biden made 2 stops in battleground Pennsylvania last week and plans another on Labor Day. He will visit Milwaukee and Pittsburgh Monday. Later this week, Biden speaks at the DNC's summer meeting outside the nation's capital and then heads to Ohio. Joining him there, Congressman Tim Ryan, who is running in a close Senate race against J.D. Vance. Ryan skipped Biden's previous trip to the state. Former President Donald Trump also traveled to Pennsylvania near Biden's hometown Saturday night.
The shameful raid and break-in of my home, Mar-a-Lago, was a travesty of justice.
Trump spoke as the Justice Department continues its investigation into how he kept classified documents at his Mar-a-Lago estate. Many Republicans have called the FBI search unprecedented. The former president's attorney general responded.
People say this was unprecedented. Well, it's also unprecedented for a president to take all this classified information and put him in a country club.
Bill Barr also said naming a special master for the Mar-a-Lago documents is a, quote, waste of time. Mike?
Lucas Tomlinson reporting from the White House. Lucas, many thanks. Joining us now is Congressman Sean Patrick Maloney, who leads the House committee working...
And I don't have a clip of Sean Patrick Maloney, the Democrat in the House of Representatives in charge of getting Democrats elected to the House of Representatives, but later I will have a total lack of cross-examination by Mike Emanuel of the Republican in charge of getting Republicans elected to the House of Representatives, Tom Emmer. But actually, I have to give kudos to Fox News Sunday, and I've said that they're not a news organization, they're not a journalistic organization, but one thing I do say is sometimes, incidentally, journalism is accidentally committed over on Fox News, and I have to applaud Fox News for showing those Bill Barr clips at the former Trump attorney general who's turned on Trump and is saying, why did he take those documents? And there's enough to indict him and probably convict him. And Bill Barr also testified to the January 6th committee. I think he's trying to rehabilitate his reputation after being a total toady for Trump for years. He spun the Mueller investigation dishonestly and made sure that Trump wasn't going to face any sort of prosecution for his multiple instances of obstruction of justice that the Mueller report found. And anyway, I don't want to go into all that old history, but actually I do want to make sure you know that there was Russia collusion shown in the Mueller report, just not not Russia collusion that rose to the level of a criminal conspiracy, because later when I showed that Tom Emmer lack of cross-examination on Fox News Sunday, Tom Emmer will talk about the phony Russia hoax or whatever, which isn't true. And anyway, I want to get through the rest of the news summaries, though. The NBC News Meet the Press news summary is the next longest news summary, and they did something weird, or, well, not weird for Meet the Press. They have the motto of NBC News Meet the Press is, if it's Sunday, it's Meet the Press. And we all know that that is a lie, which is weird that a news show would have a lie as their motto, because there are various like sports events that will preempt Meet the Press various Sundays. And this Sunday, I guess, was a 3-day weekend because of Labor Day. Oh, I know last week I think I got Labor Day and Memorial Day mixed up after I got Carl Reiner and Rob Reiner mixed up. So go back and watch last Monday's show and you'll see that. But it was Labor Day, 3-day weekend. Happy Labor Day, everybody. You saw some of the news summaries talking about that, and you'll see Chuck Todd say Happy Labor Day at the beginning of this news summary I'm about to show you. But I have no confidence that this was recorded on any time during this weekend. This could have been recorded any time in the last year. I assume it was recorded sometime in the last week, but it's not a live show. It mentioned nothing about the news, nothing about Biden's speech on Thursday. But I can't get totally upset about it because the topic they decided to pre-record and spend the whole program on for the special Meet the Press yesterday was policing in America, which is actually a topic I've spent many years working on. One of their guests is Paul Butler, the author of this book, Chokehold, that you see over next to my left shoulder for a long time. And it's a great book about how the structural racism in our criminal justice system impacts specifically black men. And of course, over here, for a very long time, I've had Michelle Alexander's book, The New Jim Crow, about how our criminal justice system is like a new system of racial control instituted after Jim Crow was outlawed by the Supreme Court, and that's the way it's functioned in the post-Jim Crow era. And so, yeah, there's a lot of racism and problems in policing. I'm a former public defender. I spent 5 years defending people in the criminal justice system. I've been an ACLU activist for like 15 years and spent a lot of time working on these issues as well. So I'm glad to see Meet the Press talk about these issues, and they did it. I'm going to show you just like the introductory part before they go to this Lester Holt NBC News, NBC Nightly News, or no, it was actually a Dateline program from like a month ago about this black man killed in Maryland, Anton Black. And I'm not going to show you the whole thing because my like copyright spidey senses started tingling right when they were playing music and Lester Holt's voice came on. I thought, if I play the rest of this clip, I'm going to get a copyright claim from NBC, I bet. But anyway, I'll show you like the part up to when my copyright spidey senses started tingling on this NBC News Meet the Press news summary about policing in America. And I'll talk about that. And then the final clip that I'm going to show at the end of the program, that's also from Meet the Press, but here's the news summary. It's not news, though, but it is important over here.
Good Sunday morning, and I hope you're enjoying your Labor Day weekend. This morning, we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to take a deep dive into the debate over policing in America. There are few cases of policing more notorious or consequential than that of George Floyd. Floyd's in-custody death at the hands of police officer Derek Chauvin and 3 others on May 25th, 2020, sparked a huge national debate about defunding police. It set off street demonstrations, and it made the phrase Black Lives Matter a household term. But it's another case that happened before George Floyd in the small town of Greensboro, Maryland, with similarities and connections to the George Floyd case that we're actually going to examine in depth today. First reported by Dateline last month by Lester Holt and supervising producer Dan Slepian. The death of a young man named Anton Black in police custody touches on so many fault lines we've been debating about policing over the last few years. Race, mental health, escalation versus de-escalation, police accountability, and the role of the medical examiner, just to name a few. In this morning's special edition of Meet the Press, we're going to review what happened to Anton Black, how he died, how the cause of death was determined, and perhaps most important, how a police officer with a history of violence in another jurisdiction was even allowed to be on the job. And in each step of the way, I'm going to talk to experts on policing, a scholar on race, criminal justice, the president of a police defense fund, and the director of the Innocence Project, as well as a former medical examiner. But let's start by meeting Anton Black, a star athlete whose death has raised so many questions about policing in America. Here's Lester Holt.
How you guys doing? My name is Anton Black, and I'll be like my introduction video.
Okay, and that's where I started worrying that I was going to get a copyright strike from Lester Holt coming after me for taking a clip from the NBC Nightly News, but who knows. But like I said, I think that was an important issue that was addressed by Chuck Todd on NBC News Meet the Press. They had Paul Butler on, the author of the book Chokehold right here, and they also had this like total apologist for the cops, like the head of the police legal defense fund or whatever, who like made all these specious arguments. They had someone from the Innocence Project, and they had this Dr. Roger Mitchell, a former medical examiner from Washington, D.C., who actually had a really good suggestion to create extra transparency, because that's really what we need in police. I mean, some people say abolish the police, defund the police, and I talked about defund the police when that started to be a term that, and I think it's not the greatest phrase, but it does represent something that people on the street are saying, that, you know, a lot of money goes to the police to handle problems that police can't handle, like mental health crises and other things that could be better responded to by, you know, people with backgrounds in psychology rather than, you know, warrior cops with guns and batons and tasers and all of that. But the clip I'm actually going to show you is this medical examiner, like I said, from Washington, D.C., Roger Mitchell, talking about how we can have, I was talking about accountability and transparency. Well, a really good suggestion so we have more transparency into the problem of people who die when they're in the custody of the police. But anyway, I'll get to that. That's the 11th clip, the final newsmaker clip at the end of the program. But before I get to that, I'm going to go back to my main topic, the threat to U.S. democracy from the MAGA Republicans. And I have one more news summary, CNN State of the Union. Dana Bash talks about that, and then also talks about this water crisis in Jackson, Mississippi, and I'll talk about that a little more after we watch that final news summary together over here.
Hello, I'm Dana Bash, and the State of our Union is hitting the campaign trail. Happy Labor Day weekend, the unofficial end to summer and kickoff to campaign season. President Biden is heading to key midterm states tomorrow, 2 of them. He's visiting Wisconsin and Pennsylvania after he warned Americans that his predecessor, former President Trump, posed a threat to the future of American democracy. Today, we're going to test how that speech and other top issues like the economy, education, and abortion are resonating in the midterm campaigns. We're going to get the view from both candidates in a race that could determine control of the Senate. Democratic incumbent Senator Patty Murray and her Republican challenger Tiffany Smiley. But we begin this morning with a crisis that surpasses politics. Americans living in conditions unfathomable for most of the U.S. In the city of Jackson, Mississippi, today water pressure is back for many of the thousands who have been without running water for a week, but the water is still not drinkable after weeks of residents being told they needed to boil what comes out of their taps. FEMA's director just visited Jackson, and she's here with us now to talk about efforts to fix this disaster. FEMA Director Deanne Criswell, thank you so much for being here.
And yeah, I mean, that is an important news story, the water crisis in Jackson, Mississippi, although I heard they have water pressure back. I saw Tate Reeves, the Republican governor of Mississippi, tweeting that. It seems to be like a failure of Republican government, if you ask me, but that I've seen them covering it on Fox News, but never mentioning all the Republicans who were involved in the failure. And I know if it were Democrats involved in the failure of the government to get water to hundreds of thousands of people, that would probably be the main focus of the Fox News stories. But anyway, that was the last of the news summaries. You can tell me which one you think did the best. And Now I'm going to get to the newsmaker clips. I have one Democrat, Jamie Raskin, on CBS News Face the Nation is the first clip. Then I have 3 Republicans, all talking about my main topic, the threat to U.S. democracy of the MAGA Republicans. And then at the end, as I said, in the penultimate, right after the penultimate news summary, I said I would be showing this clip of a medical examiner who had a good idea to increase transparency about people who die in the custody of police. But first, I'm going to start on my main topic, the threat of the MAGA Republicans, with Jamie Raskin. I said earlier, I think that Major Garret, who's now working for CBS and used to work as a reporter on Fox News, is trying to atone for his Fox News sins by giving this total softball question to the Democrat Jamie Raskin. This question is like, so Trump says that the MAGA Republicans are actually defending democracy, but Trump did all these things that threaten democracy. What's your evaluation of this? I'm not making that up. That's pretty much the question. It's a softball question to a Democrat from Major Garret. You can tell me if you think he's trying to atone for his Fox News sins or what's up with this question after we watch it together over here.
So former President Trump says that MAGA Republicans are trying to save democracy and they want to be taken seriously on this issue. So let's review what the former president said this week earlier. He said the 2020 election should be rerun or he should be reinstated in office, and that if reelected in 2024, he would provide apologies and full pardons to those charged and or convicted for storming the Capitol on January 6th. Evaluate that.
Well, first, if he's saying that the election should be rerun, which is something he's been asserting from the beginning, that's totally outside of the Constitution. There's no procedure for the military just to seize the election machinery and run a new election, which is one of the things that his disgraced former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn was pushing, and we know was part of the January 6th plot. Look, more than 60 courts rejected every claim of electoral fraud and corruption, which Donald Trump advanced. He's had the benefit of more than 60 courts, including 8 courts where he appointed the judges to office, look at all those claims, and they were all rejected. It was rejected in the states, and he lost the election. 2 of the hallmarks of a fascist political party are, 1, they don't accept the results of elections that don't go their way, and 2, they embrace political violence. And I think that's why President Biden was right to sound the alarm this week about these continuing attacks on our constitutional order from the outside by Donald Trump and his movement.
Let's talk about the January 6th committee.
So yeah, I thought Jamie Raskin did a good job of laying out the threat from the MAGA Republicans to our democracy in the United States here, and the threat of violence, the inability to accept elections except when they win, and the election deniers being elected to positions of power. And did he say that last part? I can't remember. But having seen that good defense of Biden's speech on Thursday about the threat to U.S. democracy from MAGA Republicans, now I'm going to show you 3 different Republicans talking about that with various levels of cross-examination. This first one is the worst one. It's the worst cross-examination because it's from Fox News Sunday. Mike Emanuel, he's not really trying to cross-examine Republicans about their ridiculous misinformation or disinformation talking points. Here you'll see Mike Emanuel is talking to Tom Emmert, and the part I think is ridiculous about this is, do you think the fact that Trump is in the news is going to hurt Republicans? Never saying like what it is that Fox News, or what Trump is in the news about. Fox News doesn't tell you that, but anyway, here is the lack of, sometimes I have the cross-examination of the week, and actually I think the CNN State of the Union clip I'm going to show you in the clip after next may be the cross-examination of the week. But here is the lack of cross-examination of the week from Mike Emanuel on Fox News Sunday, talking to Republican Representative Tom Emmert, letting him get away with like all sorts of ridiculous Republican conspiracy theory talking points. I think Hunter Biden shows up in here. The Russia hoax shows up. Anyway, I'll talk about it all a little more after we watch that clip together over here.
Does former President Trump being in the news hurt your candidates because then you aren't hammering inflation, gasoline prices, the border crisis, and, of course, crime in many major American cities?
Look, the American Intelligence Agency and this administration has been after Donald Trump since day one. In fact, the intelligence agency's been after him since he started running for office. And now the White House has prioritized going after anyone who disagrees with him. In fact, the White House press secretary last week said that anybody who disagrees with the Democrats in the White House, with the Biden administration, is an extremist. The raid on the former president's home is not only unprecedented, it's outrageous. And by the way, this double standard is why so many Americans are pissed off about this. Republicans, Democrats, independents, because while they go after Donald Trump and suggest that he's done something, which they've been doing for years, I would say that they lost their credibility 6 years ago with the Russian collusion hoax. And while they're doing all this, Hunter Biden is still out there being able to peddle influence all around the world, and they do nothing to him. Americans are pissed off about that. They're going to show up in November, and Democrats are going to answer for it.
Have you or your team at the NRCC recommended to any Republicans that they distance themselves from former President Trump?
Absolutely not. The president has been a fantastic ally of ours, especially when it comes to fundraising. And our candidates, again, what we tell them is, you know your districts. You know how to run to the people that are going to be voting for you in November. And I am convinced that when people vote, they're going to ask that question, am I better off today than I was 2 years ago? And they're going to say overwhelmingly no. Prices are out of control. My security's in jeopardy. It's time for a change, and they're going to vote in a new Republican majority.
Republicans have been highly critical of President Biden's student debt giveaway. Some have suggested it's even unconstitutional. If you win back the majority, should Republicans in the House sue or take some other action to block the president?
Well,
student debt giveaway unconstitutional. That was the follow-up question. So, yeah, no, not a lot of follow-up on all those ridiculous conspiracy theory Republican talking points from Representative Tom Emmert. Mike Emanuel did a terrible job on his cross-examination of the Republican. Earlier, he had the Democrat on, Representative Maloney, the head of or the person in charge of getting Democrats reelected and elected to the House of Representatives. He cross-examined him a lot harder on the whole threat to democracy of MAGA Republicans, but that was the closest Mike Emanuel came to cross-examining the Republican, and it wasn't there. You can tell me what you think, but anyway, this next clip isn't quite as bad as Fox News Sunday, but I think Martha Raddatz lets Mike McCall get away with a little bit of both sidism. I think I said that earlier. Here you can see Martha Raddatz is asking a Republican about the threat to U.S. democracy from the MAGA Republicans. And then she mentions, oh, well, Trump has also said some divisive things, and lets Mike McCall get away with saying, oh, well, bad rhetoric on both sides. Like what Biden said on Thursday is anything like the attack on his opponents from Trump that we saw for 4 years. But anyway, you can let me know what you think in the comment section as we watch that second to last Republican trying to respond to the danger to U.S. democracy from MAGA Republicans over here.
Congressman, in response to the president's speech, you immediately tweeted that attacking half of America will only further divide our country. When you look at those polls showing 60 to 70% of Republicans believe Joe Biden is not the legitimate president, what is Biden supposed to do when the country cannot even decide what democracy means?
Well, I mean, democracy is messy, but it's better than all the other forms of government. I think that if this was a speech to unify the American people, it had just the opposite effect. It basically condemned all Republicans who supported Donald Trump in the last election. That's over 70 million people. And, saying that Republicans are a threat to democracy is really a slap in the face. And my vote on certification and my position on that. I took an oath to the Constitution. But having said that, you don't come out to unify the nation. This was not a presidential address, by the way. It was a political speech that wasn't even carried by your network or the other two major networks because it was so political. It was a campaign speech before the midterm elections, and that's basically how I see it.
And how much should Donald Trump be blamed for the division in this country? You heard him say last night Biden is an enemy of the state. He has called the left-wing fascists in the past.
We know the rhetoric on both sides has been heightened. I don't think, people in mainstream America particularly like, the divisive rhetoric. I think, I wish the president could have been more like Abraham Lincoln, who really did. He did not condemn the Democrats in the South in that time. He actually brought them into the tent. And I think that would be the mission I would advise for the president. I think he failed to do that in this speech that he gave.
So let's talk about the investigation. Last night, Donald Trump called the investigation into classified material stored at his house shameful, a travesty of justice, saying the FBI and Department of Justice have become, as he said, vicious monsters. Your reaction to that?
Well, look, I think there's a legal side of this. I was a former federal prosecutor, and there's the perception in the optics. I think the perception is what a lot of Republicans I know see on the heels of the Russian investigation, the Steele dossier. There's a certain distrust but verify attitude when it comes to the Department of Justice and the FBI, and it frankly saddens me because as an alumni of DOJ, I hate to see people's faith in our institutions being weakened. I have a lot of questions. Why didn't they enforce the subpoena before they did this unprecedented search warrant on a former president of the United States? This will all obviously come out factually as this case moves forward.
Do you see any reason that he should have taken those documents, those classified, highly classified documents to Mar-a-Lago?
Well, look, I have lived in the classified world most of my professional career. I personally wouldn't do that, but I'm not the president of the United States. He has a different set of rules that apply to him. The president can declassify a document on a moment's notice, and we don't have all the facts. I know they were taken out of the White House while he was president, and whether or not he declassified those documents remains to be seen. He says he did. I don't have all the facts there.
Bill Barr basically said if he stood over documents and said these are all declassified, it's an absurd idea. You think that's what happened?
There is a process for declassification, but again, the president's in a very different position than most of us in the national security space. And if this was such a national security threat, for God's sakes, why didn't they brief the Gang of Eight on this? The relevant committees on the Hill have asked for briefings on this to find out what was so important here from a national security standpoint that would merit such an extreme measure to have a search warrant on a former president of the United States.
Okay, I want to turn to foreign affairs here. You are on the foreign affairs.
So yeah, I think Martha Raddatz let Mike McCall get away with a little bit of both sidism on the rhetoric. Like, well, there's Trump's rhetoric and Biden's rhetoric. Like, Biden's rhetoric is anywhere near as divisive as what Trump subjected to us to for 4 years of his presidency. But anyway, I didn't think that was the greatest cross-examination. It was better than what we saw over on Fox News Sunday. But actually, I guess the cross-examination of the week, I showed you softball question of the week, but I guess the cross-examination of the week, if there is going to be one, is the cross-examination of this Senate candidate in the state of Washington, Tiffany Smiley. This is on CNN State of the Union. Dana Bash is trying to get her to admit that Biden is the legitimately elected fair and square president of the United States. And all she'll say, you'll see, is like, yes, he's president of the United States, but never legitimately elected, never fair and square. And you have to give Dana Bash credit for making it pretty clear that this particular Republican is one of those MAGA Republicans who's a threat to U.S. democracy, because she only accepts the results of elections where her choice wins. And that's the thing. That's a threat to democracy. If you only accept the results of elections where your candidate wins, democracy doesn't work. And so kudos to Dana Bash for making that clear in this penultimate newsmaker clip I'll talk about with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
I want to ask about another issue that voters call a priority, and that is the state of American democracy. I want to play a little bit of what President Biden said on Thursday night.
I want to be very clear up front. Not every Republican, not even the majority of Republicans, are MAGA Republicans. MAGA Republicans do not respect the Constitution. They do not believe in the rule of law. Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans represent an extremism that threatens the very foundations of our republic.
When you think about the January 6th attack on the Capitol, the threats against the FBI, attempts to overturn the election, the former president floating pardons for insurrectionists, do you think that President Biden is right about some parts of your party?
I was very disappointed with his speech. Look, as a family that has served and sacrificed for this country, you know, when I stood up and was a voice for my husband and then went on for additional reform in the VA, we were fighting for every Democrat, Republican, and independent disabled veteran and their family. So I was extremely disappointed, because unity is not conformity. And I think President Biden got that really, really mixed up. You know, in fact, debate is the cornerstone of democracy. And you can ask Patty Murray when she comes on why she hasn't accepted debates that are on the calendar to debate me. Healthy debate is who we are as a country. It's actually what makes us better. And that's what I look forward to fighting for and debating my opponent, Senator Patty Murray.
The point that President Biden was making is election integrity is also a cornerstone of democracy. And it's a concern shared by some in your party, that the idea that there are election deniers, that they're sowing doubt about what happened in 2020. So let's just drill down on this question. Simple yes or no. Do you believe that Joe Biden won the 2020 election fair and square?
Yes, he is our president. Yes, and to be clear, you know, I think in 2016, Hillary Clinton had concerns. Stacey Abrams had concerns. This is an issue on both sides of the aisle. This isn't a Democrat or Republican issue. We need to protect the integrity of our elections. They need to be, you know, easy to cheat, right, or hard to cheat and easy to vote. That is very clear.
And let me ask,
and that's
I'm going to ask you about that in a second.
This
but
is
you
not
said
a divisive. Yeah.
You said that President Biden is our president. Was he fairly elected, legitimately elected?
Yes, Joe Biden is our president. And look, my campaign has been so successful because from day one, I am focused on the endorsement of the voters of Washington State and delivering results. I care about the people of Washington State. That's who I'm fighting for. And unfortunately, Patty Murray fights for Washington, D.C. Her and Joe Biden have a combined 80 years in government, and we are just not any better off in Washington State because of that.
Okay, you didn't say that he was legitimately elected. I just want to give you one more chance to say that, and if you are comfortable with your answer, we'll move on.
Yes, I think I made it clear. He is our president. And again, I am focused on the voters of Washington State. I'm focused on the future and what I can deliver. We have a crisis here in Washington State, and I am here to turn crisis into hope.
Okay. In March, you told McClatchy that you'd welcome former President Donald Trump's endorsement. You said if the president...
So yeah, you can see Dana Bash moved on there after a great job trying to get Tiffany Smiley to say Biden was fair and square, legitimately elected. Won't say that because that's the weird thing Republicans have to try to do in the midterms, is like keep the MAGA Trump Republican voters by not admitting, not admitting Biden is the legitimately elected president of the United States, but then also trying to reach out to like independents and Democrats. That's crazy. And anyway, I'm hoping that craziness will actually deny Kevin McCarthy the leadership of being the Speaker of the House, and maybe Democrats will keep the House. It looks like it's more and more likely they're going to keep the Senate. And anyway, that is the last of the newsmaker clips on my main topic. I also said I was going to show you this one last clip of Dr. Roger Mitchell advocating for something that would make it much more, nationally, we could know much more about how people are dying in custody, because jails are like really bad places. I've been to a lot of jails and prisons. They let people just like die in their cells without giving them health care, and all we need is this one checkbox to really get transparency into this terrible issue. And anyway, Dr. Roger Mitchell talks about that with Chuck Todd in the final newsmaker clip I'll talk about with you a little more after we watch that clip together over here.
About a bigger picture here, which is we don't know the true number of people that die in custody in America, whether you die in custody during an arrest, die in custody perhaps while you're in jail or in prison, die in custody perhaps in a healthcare facility. It is not on any form, is it?
No, and the reality of it is that in order for us to understand the whole burden of this injury or disease in this country, we need to know how many people are dying. There's a Deaths in Custody Reporting Act that is in law that is not being fully complied with across this country.
We don't have it mandatory in death certificates to check that box or not?
No,
correct?
We don't even have it on a death certificate. So I've been calling for a checkbox on the U.S. standard death certificate merely to say yes or no whether or not a death is in custody. Because yes, Anton Black is terrible, and so is George Floyd. But there are hundreds of people that are dying from natural disease that they didn't need to die from while incarcerated.
Right, we may
That's
find
just
out,
as important.
How about a little better health care at some of these facilities, right? Or something like that. A pharmaceutical help here or something like that, correct? Like this is the type of things we could discover.
Absolutely. And an objective public health measure. The reason why we know about maternal mortality and why women are dying while in childbirth is because there's a checkbox on the U.S. standard death certificate. The reason why we know smoking is contributing to cancers is because there's a checkbox on the U.S. standard death certificate. Motor vehicle collisions. A checkbox on the U.S. standard death certificate.
And yet not in custody. You created this box when you were here in D.C.
That's correct.
And did this. How, took you about a year to get everybody, did you get pushback from law enforcement? Did you get pushback from some?
It's interesting. I work well with law enforcement. Been, a medical examiner for over 15 years. And once we articulated and started educating people about how having this data readily available can help us prevent deaths, people were pretty much on board. So it took me about a year, but we got it done locally. But we need to get it done nationally.
And we don't have time to even get into the whole conversation that how is it that we can elect these people? Elect folks.
So yeah, that was the NBC News Meet the Press coverage, and I criticized Chuck Todd for not having coverage of this week's news, but that was a great suggestion from Dr. Roger Mitchell. That's the last of my news clips. I think I mentioned last week that next week I'm not going to do a Monday Media Mix-Up. I'm going to actually do a special Sunday show, a Sunday Media Mix-Up, because next Monday I'm getting my tooth extracted and I can't do the Sunday Media Mix-Up or the Monday Media Mix-Up, so I'll do a Sunday one. But anyway, I got to finish this and get to my 4 o'clock meeting I have every Monday. And anyway, I hope you appreciate the time and effort I put into this show, and I appreciate the Super Chat contributions from Matthew and Lulu Girl. And I will be back next Sunday and then every Monday after that through the November midterms. And until then, I guess I will be seeing all of you around the internet.